Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on Financial First Aid. Today, I am so excited to welcome Suzette Bailey. She is a co-creator or co-founder of Simple Marketing AI. 4 years ago, she tried to pivot her successful sorry. 4 years ago, she tried to pivot her successful business advising government agencies on information management to help small business owners systematize their operations. She found that her skill at that, doing six-figure deals, didn't translate to selling $500 courses. She struggled to continually generate the content required to market her new business. When she saw the opportunity in late 2020 to use world-leading AI to generate marketing content for businesses like her own, she took advantage of it. Co-founding Simple Marketing AI, she's built the business with a focus on helping businesses short on marketing and technical skills to generate the marketing content they need to attract and engage customers. With an initial product in the market and a free account for light users, Simple Marketing AI is now helping businesses around the world to generate the content they need every day to market and grow. And I really would like to welcome you, Suzette Bailey. This is going to be an interesting conversation. And I just want my audience to understand that the reason why she's on Financial First Aid is because my podcast is about entrepreneurship. And certainly if you have a product or a service that you have as your business, you certainly need marketing, especially in this day and time, because social media is crazy, and the internet will help you, can either make you or break you in your company. So please, Miss Suzette, welcome to my podcast, Financial First Aid.
Thanks so much, Vera, for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great, great. So what's the central focus of your company?
So simple marketing is, as it says, it's about marketing, making marketing simple. And the way we do that is we use a AI platform to write your first draft of your marketing content for you in under a minute, using a few keywords or key phrases. So it's all about trying to make the whole process of marketing yourself much easier and much simpler, and definitely much faster, because as small entrepreneurs or small business owners and entrepreneurs, we don't have a lot of time to spend writing up a lot of content to market ourselves, because we need to be getting in and actually selling or doing things in our business.
And how did your journey of entrepreneurship begin?
Well, my entrepreneurship actually started in the other company that you mentioned, which is Century 7, and it's an IT consulting company. And for the people who haven't actually quite worked out yet, I'm an Aussie, Australian, so working to the government was actually the Australian federal government, and also other big organisations here in Australia. So how I got started was I sort of fell into it. With that, I actually was working as a quarantine officer for the government at the time, and I really enjoyed sort of work, being able to do a lot of things with IT and web development and that sort of thing. And so I started a web development company initially, and it morphed itself into that information management company. And I really loved that. I really loved, sort of learning and problem solving around how people use information and making complex systems simple. And as you mentioned, a few years ago, I got to a point, though, that I really needed a change. And I realized that a lot of business owners like myself and entrepreneurs needed to be able to know how to systemize their business, how to get improvements in productivity. And so I tried to pivot to bringing what I did to that particular market, and bombed spectacularly, because I was not able to take the sort of what I did and provide it. It wasn't so much that there was any problem with what I did; it was absolutely what was needed. But the problem I had was that I was a trained scientist, having worked with the government. So I wrote very much in the third person, which for people who are listening is probably not the most interesting language in marketing content. So when I actually tried to move across, I found it very difficult to write marketing content, so much so that I would stress over the fact that I couldn't sell a $500 product or a training course, even though, as you said, I was actually doing six-figure deals in the consulting business.
Okay, all right. It sounds, it's comical because someone that was so adept at, doing it for someone else was having difficulty doing it for herself, for yourself.
Well, interestingly enough, because, and this is a really good tip also for people who are, around the power of, we call it niching. I think you call it niching. I was actually considered an expert in a very, very specific niche. Okay. And because of that, I didn't actually have to market. So it got to a point where I got so many referrals to other, I was the go-to person. In fact, recently, somebody actually, a friend of mine on Facebook, well, she's a friend of mine, but through Facebook, she actually sent me a message saying, here, look at this photo of your business card in a cubicle of somebody in the Defense Department. Obviously, nothing else was shown. It was just my business card. But it was really funny that she was walking through, sort of that department and then saw my business card stuck up on somebody's cubicle. And that was sort of how I got business. So I never really had to do this thing called internet marketing or marketing, sort of online or anything like that. And I think this expectation that we have on business owners who are absolutely geniuses at what they do, that they should miraculously understand how to write and how to actually market themselves online, is a bit of a fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now, does your company help, if someone comes to you and says, hey, listen, I need, some public relations work. How can you help me besides just doing the simple marketing piece? Do they do any of that?
No, we're not actually in public relations. We, in fact, work with some fantastic public relations organisations. What we're focused on is a lot of people, they will talk to you about having to promote yourself online. So it is related to public relations, but public relations is where you actually promote yourself to to news agents and news corporations and those sort of things, and they do articles and interviews and things on you. What we do is what's called content marketing. So content marketing is otherwise known as also authority marketing, which is making yourself the authority. So as I mentioned, I was the authority in that government sector for what I did. What I didn't know how to do, because it had been a while, was how to actually change that and apply that in a new market with the entrepreneurs, and how to actually make and position myself as an authority. And that's what content marketing does. It positions you personally, but also your company or your business as an authority on that particular niche that you are actually targeting.
So in the 4 years that you were trying to develop your company, were you ever discouraged and said, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to go back to doing what I was doing before?
Multiple times. Look, and in fairness, and I have to actually admit, I actually did. I parked the whole trying to move into the small business market for that period of time, and it's only through simple marketing that which has only just been launched at the beginning of 2021. So it launched in January as a company and March as a public offering. As a service. So it's very new. But before that, to be really frank, I was working in the other company because it was easier. It was my go-to place. I knew I had that, that customer base and that sort of thing. So it is very easy to fall back on it. And as an entrepreneur, it was a tough time for a lot of people through the 2020. For me, unfortunately, 2019 was actually worse for me than 2020. We've been very blessed that COVID is not particularly very prevalent in Australia, and very much not in the area that I am. I'm in Washington, the equivalent of Washington, DC in Australia, in Canberra, and we actually haven't had any community transfer. So 2019, I got very sick. And this is another factor that a lot of people find when they're in business is, what do you do when you actually are very unwell or very sick? And a lot of people have faced that in the last 12 months or so.
Yes. Yeah, let's
sort of
speak
thing.
to that. Yeah, explain, please.
No problems. Look, and this happened to me twice over the period of my other consultancy, my building up that business, of where I have actually become sick, that it took me offline for 12 to 18 months the first time, and it really took me offline about almost 24 months this time.
Oh, wow.
So in both cases, in the first case, it affected me considerably more. I, in fact, actually incurred a 6-figure tax debt because of it with our equivalent of our IRS. And because I didn't actually take steps in the business to wind up things fast enough while I was unwell. And from that, I learned a lot, actually. I learned a huge amount about that I should actually walk the talk that I actually stated, which was putting systems in my own business. Because even though I was doing a lot of work with with government and other organizations, I never really put a lot of systems in my business. And that's something as a tip for people, is make sure that you have a plan for, things happening unexpectedly. In that particular case, I literally woke up one morning with a massive allergic reaction to the point that it put me in hospital for 2 weeks, and significant, issues afterwards. So you don't know what's going to come around the corner.
Right.
That preparing financially and having the, things like, I now have insurances in place that protect, sort of protect the company, protect me personally. I put systems in place, those sort of things, which then meant the second time I got very unwell, which was in 2019, it was actually not it didn't affect me as bad. Even though it was a longer period, it didn't actually affect my business as much as that first one did.
That's great, because that actually is one of my questions, and you answered it perfectly. One of the questions is, what would you do? What would you have done differently, now that you know some things that you know? And that's a great answer. First, put some systems in place, and secondly, try to make sure that you're prepared for the unexpected. That's a really good nugget for entrepreneurs to have, to know that. At this point now, you've helped thousands of entrepreneurs. I know your business has just started. I get that. But what kind of advice would you give, someone who's a startup now? What kind of things should they do to getting started?
Look, there's a lot of, you get a lot of advice when you're first starting up, and entrepreneurs, and in fact, actually all the way through. But the one thing I sort of is that don't try to do everything yourself. I think one of the things that, as business owners, and particularly once people who are just starting out, we think we have to do everything ourselves. And I do appreciate it's hard when you're first starting to be able to pay somebody else to do it. But there's other ways potentially getting started and not having to do everything yourself. For example, when I started, I actually I didn't know this. This is not really what people did, which was I knocked on all the doors of all my competitors and said, "Could you please help me? Can you actually help?" And we actually, and I fostered a collaborative approach very early on in my business.
And that's,
in fact, good. I don't actually know how. Very much so. In fact, I don't know actually now how to build a business without collaboration. So that's another sort of tip is, and what you can do is, if you can't, as I said, don't do everything yourself, but the things that you're not great at, find another business owner in a similar sort of level of maturity, but is an expert in that field, and do swaps of services, for instance. That's a way you can do it without actually, spending any money, for instance, is a really quick way. Plus, you're also building up really strong relationships with those businesses, and those people become your partners. And in fact, one of my biggest deals that I did in the fastest amount of time actually came through a competitor. A so-called competitor that I had worked with, previously, who recommended us to a very, very large Australian company, and that was going to be doing some work into federal government, and we were going to be their face, and they couldn't do it, so they recommended us. And so this, I think, is something that a lot of people, particularly when they're starting out in business, don't realize is, even though you may be competitors officially, as in you might be both financial planners, or you both might be business coaches, you both have different expertise. You have both different, sort of niches or niches. And more often than not, you can help each other and refer business to each other as opposed to trying to work against each other.
Great. That's a great piece of advice. Yeah. So, what would be some things that new business owners could do to accelerate their business growth and also maximize their finances? You really gave a good example when you said, okay, if you can't afford to pay somebody, this is a good way to maximize your finances. You kind of barter. That's what you do. And then you help each other. And that's a great approach to business as opposed to being competitive. So what would you tell, someone that's a new entrepreneur? Okay, if you do this, you can really maximize your finances. And if you do this, you can really accelerate your business growth. Just name one or two things.
Look, some of the things is working out what your pain point, what are the areas that you actually are not great at. And as I mentioned, that was probably the first one. The second one is also using software tools like simplemarketing.ai, which can help you to fast track your creation of content, but there's other tools in the market that will help you with your challenges. So the things you're not great at, and you're generally for a very low cost. And start small with them. Sort of don't go for the big Rolls Royce packages. Start with something, really small and get going. Sort of thing like Simple Marketing. We have a free account, but you then have a $17 a month account, and for that you can get 20 or 30 pieces of content each month. Well, that then gives you a little bit of a movement. It starts to build your authority, and you can then build up to the next basis. And the same thing with your other, with other sort of top technology and software. Don't buy things that you're not going to use. Make sure they're aligned with what you actually, what problems you're solving at the moment, or what problems you're facing at the moment. But don't try to say probably this is also the really big one, is that people get overwhelmed a lot when they're first starting out with trying to solve all their problems at the same time. Work out all your problems, but pick which one's the easiest and the fastest to solve first.
Okay.
And then do the next one and do them in order. Don't do because then you can focus on that. You can get that working for you, and then you can go on to the next thing. If you try to do it all at the same time, you're just going to be overwhelmed.
Right. Absolutely. So my podcast is, my tagline is to educate, motivate, and inspire entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs. So I kind of like to end my podcast two ways. One, if you would give me something that would educate, motivate, and inspire my listeners. And lastly, I want to ask you how people can get in touch with you. So tell me what you could tell my listeners. Okay, this is going to educate you.
To educate you is pretty much is learn to actually ask for help. That collaboration is really a great one, because everything that I've talked about, just even going and talking to other people can help you to work out where you're stuck. Because sometimes we absolutely all get stuck at all times, and that is right up to multi-million-dollar businesses. People get stuck. People always have challenges. So the more you are prepared to talk to people and get help from other people, the easier things are, because shared burden is always, a halved burden sort of thing. So that would probably be my number one tip around education, because you also learn from other people as well at the same time.
That sounds good. And then how about motivate?
Motivation, well, that comes sort of aligned to what I just said a minute ago. By actually talking to other people, getting out and actually collaborating with other people, it helps to motivate you, and it will keep you, instead of getting overwhelmed, you can actually see that firstly, other people have a lot of the same challenges. I think a lot of us, we get stuck in this view that we are the only the only person who has had that problem in the history of, sort of mankind. Well, the reality is most of our problems are very much the same problems that everybody else has had.
True.
And so, talking to other people helps you to firstly realize you're not alone, but secondly, they can help to build you up and inspire you, and, sort of look to people who are doing things that you want to do and use them as inspiration to keep you going.
There you go. You answered the inspiration question. You answered,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. You answered the inspiration question. One thing, well, you were going through your illnesses. What did you use to motivate you? Because that's a struggle.
Yeah, look, it was a real struggle. In fact, it was even a struggle to get off the couch during that time. Um, Really, the big one was at first was the realizing that I wasn't alone is asking for help.
Okay.
And look, I will tell you, sort of own the fact that I am a recovering sort of perfectionist and an A type personality. So
Okay.
asking for help
Was
for
difficult.
me is not hard, is not easy. Like
Was
it's
difficult, huh? Okay.
very much so. And it's a difficult challenge for me each and every day. So I do appreciate for your listeners that, I'm saying, oh, it's just easy. Go and ask for help and everything will be fine. I'm very much of the opinion, know that it's not, and it can be hard to ask for help. But that was what I needed to do. I needed help and I asked for it. And in the case, for instance, of that tax debt, for instance, I was absolutely, sort of frantic because I had heard this massive debt and I had no idea how I was going to actually get out from underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally me going and talking to one of these people that I had built a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
And he sat me down and he said, look, this is what we're going to do. And he mapped it all out for me. He helped me to ring the ATO, which is our equivalent of the IRS. And we put in place a payment plan. And I was able to pay that money back to the government, as well as also make the company profitable in 3 years, because I asked for help from that person. And because I had the relationship that I was able to sit down, and believe me, I was a mess at that time. And there was no, it was the last thing I wanted to do is this sort of thing. And, but I asked for help and it meant that I not only paid back the money, I saved my company and turned it into a multi-million-dollar business a few years later. And, that's a big, and that was literally, and even now, I say to people, because I still actually do a lot of business and I know that particular person, I'm still in contact with him. I would literally hand my company to him in a heartbeat if he said he needed to do something, because I trust him that much.
Mm-hmm.
Because he saved my company. Without him, I would not have a company.
Right. Wow. That's great. That's a great story. That's a great story. So, Miss Suzette Bailey, how can my listeners get in touch with you?
The best way is you can go to the website, simplemarketing.ai, and there's a book a demo. You can actually book a demo with us. You are most welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Facebook or any of those. So I'm very easy to find. I'm just Suzette Bailey. I'm Suzette.Bailey at simplemarketing.ai, or on LinkedIn. I'm LinkedIn with the Suzette Bailey. You just do a quick search on those. I was quite lucky that, being sort of very IT focused from very early on, I got the Facebook and the LinkedIn Suzette Bailey instead of Suzette Bailey with a whole lot of numbers or anything like most people do.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so any of those, feel free to reach out to me. I'm very open to, if you've got any questions or need any help, because I'm all about, the collaboration side of it, is, because we are all better together.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. Not only are you a great guest to have, you're also a funny guest to have. And I thank you so much. What a delight. So this is the end of our episode for today. And I hope you have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure being on the podcast with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
So, Suzette, a lot of what it is I'm working with on my podcast is working to get people out of the shame of having to file bankruptcy. In your case, you didn't have to file bankruptcy, but you went through a tough patch there. And how did that kind of make you feel in terms of being an entrepreneur and, you were a successful business person. So having that whole thing going through that whole thing. Explain to the listeners how that went.
Yeah, look, for me, it was as sort of mentioned, it was a tough period. I found it difficult to ask for help, and that was A-line personality. A personality, we don't ask for help very easily. And because of that, I felt a huge amount of shame. And for a long time, I wouldn't tell anybody these stories around how because this whole concept of failure, we get it stuck in our heads. And yes, I didn't file bankruptcy. A lot of that's to do with a lot of the way in Australia we don't, bankruptcy is handled very differently here. So, but essentially, for all intents and purposes, I was essentially bankrupt, and I had to create strategies with help, very much with help, to get out of that. And for a long time, there was very few people who knew that story, and knew what I'd gone through. Two reasons. One was shame, and there was absolutely. The other thing too is, interestingly enough, and this is what I think a number of us don't sort of realize, is I didn't actually think anyone would be interested. I didn't actually think anyone would care to know that. They want to know about your successes, of course. You're here, but no one wants to know about your failures, because you don't fail in business. And then realize that actually that's not the case. We learn more, actually, and other people learn more from the failures. And sort of even the failure of me not being able to actually write marketing content, actually bombed on that one, in itself is I learned so much from all of that. I learned from the first one to make sure I put systems in place and put procedures and things in, or things to cover my rear end if anything ever happened to me again personally, and also the companies. But I also, from the situation of the marketing one, for instance, I learned what the struggles that people go through trying to do this, and the expectations on business owners. Simple marketing would not exist without all of that, without the sum of my experience. One of the reasons, we are quite different to our competitors, and we do have competitors, but our competitors give you an all-you-can-eat type of approach to their service. You get everything, but the typical business owner gets overwhelmed, because they don't understand marketing. They don't understand marketing terms and things. And so they need, simple. We've deliberately only gone with a very simple, very streamlined approach, and we will add in what's needed for somebody, as opposed to, shoving you all into the buffet and saying, feast yourself on all of this. Because people get overwhelmed. People get overwhelmed at a buffet. People like a la carte better. I learned that from the struggles that I personally had gone through, not being able to market my business, and I felt like a failure at that point. But the reality was, it wasn't me failing; it was me learning how not to do it, and how I can use that to actually build, well, as it now, a completely new business.
Great. That's so fantastic. Oh, I love that. I love that story. Yeah,